Hello and welcome. Tonight, United Nations Secretary General arrives in Maiduguri in continuation of his tour of West Africa and meetings with victims of terror. He is to meet President Muhammadu Buhari in Abuja. Catholic archbishops from West Africa share experiences on banditry. Vice President Professor Yemi Osinbajo admonishes them and preaches brotherhood in the sub-region. And it's World Press Freedom Day. Nigerian editors condemn attacks on journalists, demand access to information. And on business news tonight, Nigeria's stock market is projected to open positive in the month of May after hitting a 14-year high amid strong first-quarter earnings results.
And from Abuja, Nigeria's new landing ship tank, NNS Kada, is one port nearer the country as it makes its port call in Cape Town, South Africa.
And in international news from London, Russian troops have launched fresh attacks on the Azovstal steel plant in Mariupol after around 100 Ukrainian civilians were evacuated.
The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres is in the country as part of his tour to some West African countries. Arriving in Maiduguri today, he proposed the reintegration of Boko Haram members who have surrendered their arms. Mr. Guterres, who visited camps home to some of the insurgents who surrendered, as well as another housing internally displaced persons in Maiduguri, the Borno state capital, stated in a joint media conference today that investment and the integration program would help address terrorism and foster peace. Our State House correspondent Gloria Mizuke reports.
The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres arrives Maiduguri, the Borno state capital, on Tuesday afternoon as part of a two-day official visit to Nigeria. Received by the governor of Borno State, Babagana Zulum, as well as other government officials, the UN scribe proceeds to visit internally displaced persons at the camps. He also interacts with surrendered fighters and victims of Boko Haram insurgency. The United Nations chief illuminates his thoughts of Borno in a joint media conference. For him, this is a visit of solidarity with the victims of terrorism as he seeks solutions in the holy month of Ramadan.
Let's do what we have to do about humanitarian support to these camps, but let's try to find a solution for people. Yes, solution is to create the conditions, the security conditions, the development conditions for them to be able to go back home in safety and dignity. And the appeal I heard in the meeting I had with the displaced people was exactly, what we want is to go back. We don't want to live here. But having said so, when, I don't know if you were there, but when I went around with the thousands and thousands of people that were there, I saw smiles, I saw enthusiasm, I saw hope. And this is where we must invest.
Appealing to the international community to understand Borno State from a different perspective, the UN chief asserts that the menace of terrorism can be tackled from the root cause.
The way to address terrorism effectively is to provide not only hope, but a future of reality. I want to appeal strongly to the international community to understand Borno. I will be your advocate, Mr. Governor, your advocate within the international community, asking the international community to support and to invest in the Borno of hope.
The UN Secretary General continues his two-day visit on Wednesday as he is scheduled to meet with the President Muhammadu Buhari as well as the Vice President Professor Yemi Osinbajo.
As he interfaces with youths as well as women and religious leaders across the country, many hope that this visit, which is his first to Nigeria since his appointment, will translate into bigger gains for the country. Gloria Umezuke, Channels Television News.
One of the things that Nigeria should be looking forward to in the visit of the UN Secretary-General is his commitment on dealing with the war against Boko Haram and also addressing the challenge of internally displaced persons. And we've, of course, heard from the UN chief. But Nigeria's former ambassador to the United Nations in Switzerland, Ambassador Joseph Ayalogu, who was on our program, The World Today, earlier on, says that the visit will be memorable if the UN is able to assist the country in its area of needs.
Ask for continued support or effort to deal with our own works, whatever they can do to help us in dealing with our internal security challenges, which of course has implications on humanitarian issues, food issues, and so on. We have a lot of internally displaced persons. And we would definitely need some commitment from the UN on how to manage these the challenges of internal refugees and internally displaced persons. I think that the UN Secretary General's visit would, at the end of the day, would just try to reassure many countries, especially in West Africa, that issues of security or insecurity is important. So countries that are doing things that might undermine their internal security would take heed and begin to think twice think seriously on how to manage these issues, so that at least some of the challenges that lead to the outcomes of insecurity would be ameliorated at the onset, or even without these things happening at all. So that should be one of the outcomes, where his takeaway and our own takeaway too. But we'll keep telling them of our challenges. They know a lot of it, and what inputs that can be made by the UN United Nations agencies.
A lot of, what was I going to say now? Optimism following the UN chief's visit. And this is also as Nigerians look forward to the meeting between President Muhammadu Buhari and the UN Secretary General. In the meantime, the Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Farouk Yahya, is in Sokoto today, where he addressed the troops of the Operation Hadarin Daji. He hinted that the Army is considering an operational base in the northwest so as to bring his men and officers closer to the people.
In our effort to improve the reach of the Nigerian Army and other troops, and have more foot on the ground in relevant areas where we can reach and defeat these criminals, and that's the essence of establishing the forward operation base here. It's not the only one. You heard the GOC mention other places like Shimfida and other areas. We'll get there too. The effort is to have more foot on the ground in relevant areas and shorten distances to where we can reach out these criminals in their hiding places. There is no resting place for them until we defeat and neutralize all of them and recover their weapons. And the effort here signifies that project and that intent. We'll move to other areas also and have more foot on the ground. Not only foot on the ground, but also other equipment and other enablers that will enable us to reach out to all their hiding places. There's no hiding place for criminals. We'll get them all by the grace of God.
And while the Chief of Army Staff is making that promise, fighters suspected to be members of the Islamic State of West Africa province today attacked Kautukari, a community in Chibok local government area of Borno State. According to a source, the insurgents invaded the community this evening and started shooting sporadically. The ISWAP fighters reportedly set houses ablaze while locals fled into the bush for safety. Soldiers stationed at a military forward operation base in Kada, 2 kilometers away from Kautukari, were said to have been dislodged, but another military reinforcement was spotted headed towards the village to engage the terrorists and restore order. Meanwhile, the upsurge in banditry activities in West Africa sub-region is a source of concern to Catholic bishops from 16 West African countries. And they are meeting in Nigeria to discuss how to deal with this common problem and other areas of interest to them. The Vice President at the opening ceremony of the week-long meeting of the 4th Reunion Episcopal Conference urged the bishops to preach brotherhood to people in their local communities as a way of bringing the youth together. Our correspondent, Kayla Megwa, reports.
This is the 4th Catholic Episcopal Conference of West Africa, a week-long meeting of Catholic bishops of each of the 16 West African countries holding at the ECOWAS Secretariat in Abuja.
Thank you so much.
Previously held in Côte d'Ivoire, Ghana and Burkina Faso, this edition has in attendance both religious and political leaders, and conversations here are focused on the teachings of brotherhood. The prevailing sentiment at this gathering is that terrorism, banditry and other vices would drastically reduce if West Africans treat each other as brothers. Removing the roadblocks that cause exclusion will require collaborations between the church and political authority. And according to Nigeria's papal nuncio, the challenges facing the teaching of humanity first must be addressed.
We need to make every effort to achieve a true conversion of mentality which overcomes tribalism and all other forms of division and opposition based on ethnicity or other affiliation of factors.
For the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, despite efforts at integration in the West African region, there are still very salient challenges. He believes the solution can be found in a re-socialization of West Africans at community levels.
Peace cannot reign in our region if it does not first reign in our communities. By offering concrete prescriptions on building brotherhood and sustainable peace anywhere, the encyclical Fratelli Tutti rightly takes the position that it is not merely the business of governments and political institutions to find means of securing peace. It must also be anchored on our civil societies, of which our faith communities are an important constituency.
The resounding phrase for this week-long conference is the term Fratelli Tutti, which literally means all brothers. The idea is that the Catholic Church in West Africa is banding together as brothers to pull its full influence on the communities in the region. With poverty and insecurity and a lot of devices going on in this region, they do have their work cut out for them. But I believe that meetings such as this one will create a roadmap that will determine what the teachings for the next few years will be. Kayla Megwa, Channels Television News.
In Kano, the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, observed the Kano Durbar, a traditional festival, an annual event to celebrate the Eid al-Fitr. The event showcases horse riding, paying homage to the Emir, and display of gunshots to the glare of all present. And for the Vice President, it's a remarkable event. He also surprises the gathering by speaking a bit of Hausa language.
We have 2 ministers from Central Africa, and our country, we have the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, is here with us today.
I think the Kano Durbar is a fantastic spectacle. So much color, so much pomp, so much pageantry. And you know, Kano is always number one. Kano Ndabo Birni. Megala the Goron Tutsi. Megala the Goron Tutsi. So this is exciting, and I'm very, very happy to be here.
In part 2, after the break, it's World Press Freedom Day, and I'll be joined by the Executive Director of the International Press Center, IPC, Mr. Larry Arugundade. Please stay with us. Also, we'll also be bringing you the Army's response about the soldiers who were murdered, and that's in Imo State. Do join us again. Welcome back. If you just joined us, you're watching the news at 10 live on Channels Television Lagos. A reminder of our top stories. United Nations Secretary General arrives Maiduguri in continuation of his tour of West Africa and meetings with victims of terror. Catholic archbishops from West Africa share experiences on banditry attacks. Vice President Professor Yemi Osinbajo admonishes them, asks bishops to preach brotherhood in the sub-region. And it's World Press Freedom Day. Nigerian editors condemn attacks on journalists, demand access to information. And World Press Freedom Day is a day to recognize and appreciate the dedication of journalists and appraise the level of press freedom globally. Relying on this year's theme, Journalism Under Digital Siege, the National Human Rights Commission, via a statement, says the press is a critical agent for the protection of democracy and must be supported to effectively discharge their constitutional duties.
The 3rd of May every year is observed as a World Press Freedom Day as declared by the United Nations General Assembly. The day is observed to raise awareness on the importance of press freedom and to remind government all over the world of their duty to respect and uphold the right to freedom of expression as enshrined under Article 19 of the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights and marking the anniversary of the Windham Declaration. The 2022 World Press Freedom Day, with the theme Journalism Under Digital Siege, highlights the multiple ways in which journalism is endangered by surveillance and digitally instigated attacks on journalists and the consequences of all of this on public trust in digital communications. The role of the media is to act as watchdog to protect public interest against malpractice and create public awareness. A former spokesperson of the Senate believes journalists are operating freely in Nigeria.
Ours is to support and create that enabling environment for a vibrant, innovative, and productive media industry.
However, despite the Freedom of Information Act in Nigeria that provides for access to public records and information to the extent consistent with public interest, but till date, it's still a Herculean task to get information from the corridors of power. Journalists' requests are usually turned down and sometimes results to harassment. The Nigeria Guild of Editors in a statement says it's still inalienable right of journalists to disseminate information, and in keeping with such can one say there is independent press in Nigeria. The statement adds that editors in Nigeria remain under threat despite the practice of democracy in the country. The common challenges faced by journalists in Nigeria includes paucity of information, lack of access to verifiable information and data, harassment by security operatives, attacks on media personalities, sometimes leading to death. The head of the European Union delegation to Nigeria and ECOWAS shares his thoughts on press freedom.
Globally, we see more and more attempts to curb the space for free media, also by systematically undermining their credibility, and too many journalists have lost their lives or have put their lives at risk for having exposed inconvenient truth.
The latest UNESCO World Trends report also highlights some challenges being faced by journalists through surveillance and hacking, which are compromising journalism.
Well, joining me for more on World Press Freedom Day is the Executive Director, International Press Center, Mr. Lanre Arugudade. Thank you for joining us on the News at 10.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, I know that the IPC has monitored and documented not less than 40 incidents, press freedom attacks on journalists, about 49 of them last year alone. You've also, since 2020, identified over 100 journalists and other media professionals who have been victims of surveillance, spying, harassment, unlawful arrests, kidnappings. The list seems endless. What would you say is happening to Nigeria's press? Can we say that they are operating freely?
Well, I think the Nigerian press is facing very tough challenges. We're facing very tough times. As a matter of fact, we're confronted by a number of obstacles which make it difficult for us to fulfill our constitutional responsibility of holding government accountable to the people. Part of this challenge is the fact that these attacks are coming from diverse sources. We can talk of the traditional ones, the problem with security agencies, but we also have attacks by political thugs. We have attacks by unknown gunmen. We have cases of kidnapping affecting journalists, and in some cases, deliberate targeting of media institutions during moments of crisis. What has become very worrisome for us at the International Press Center and other media development groups is also the fact that during situations of national emergencies, when even the government itself recognizes journalists as frontline workers, that does not translate into reality, because in the process of doing that, we still discover that journalists are either prevented or assaulted, including during elections when journalists that were duly accredited, for example, in 2019, were still prevented, from doing their work. So for me, the situation is very precarious. Now we talk of 49 incidents and so on. These are the ones that are documented. One thing we have also discovered, and we discovered that in the course of working on 2 documentaries, which we're going to launch in a few days' time, one on voices from COVID-19 frontlines and voices from NSAS frontlines, where we got the journalists to tell more of what happened to them. But we discovered that currently in about 1 or 2 or 3 states in Nigeria, journalists there just live in a state of fear. They only report what they think would not offend the state government.
What are these states?
Yes, some of them said that, in fact, occasionally they get called upon by political thugs or security agents who tell them that, oh, we know where you live, you are a journalist with this organization, we know your movement, this is where you eat, this is where you do all things, we're watching you, mind what you report. So that is why, if you ask me, what is happening to the Nigerian press, I think the Nigerian press is really facing very, very tough challenges.
You mentioned those states. Would you like to keep them incognito? Or?
Yes, it's better. So that is part of the problem. I can't mention the state now because I'll be putting those journalists, in danger, because they shared this information with us and said, please, protect us. But then I think sooner or later we have to find a way of getting these, stories out, because for how long will this continue?
The government is of the opinion that the press is operating freely, and they've said countless of times, well, in celebrating this day, the word out is for government to support press freedom. How badly or better is our government doing this in Nigeria?
Well, you said the government is of the opinion, and that is at the level of opinion. But at the level of facts, the press in Nigeria is not free, because, facts is something that you can prove with evidence, and we have this evidence. We are not the only one documenting these attacks. Other organizations are also documenting. But what we are saying is that government has a responsibility to protect journalists, to protect press freedom, and we're not asking them to do the unusual. We have the ECOWAS protocol, for example, on democracy and good governance, which was adopted in 2001, to which Nigeria is a signatory. Article 1 of that protocol, Article 1K, says that freedom of the press shall be guaranteed. So when on the occasion of press freedom, they were saying that government should give effect to that by at least coming up with policy statements. So as we're looking at 2023 elections, for example, government could have a policy statement that says that the security agencies should not harass any journalist that is duly accredited by INEC and is able to identify him or herself. That is what we're saying. We also have the Declaration of Principles on Freedom of Expression in Africa, to which Nigeria is also a signatory. And Principle 20 also obligates government to protect journalists. So all these attacks where those responsible are alleged to be state agents, government should have a policy to say that they must be investigated, because we must be seen as partners in the development of this country. You can't strengthen democracy or have development where the media is in a very, very precarious state in terms of press freedom.
And hopefully Nigeria will move away from its rank of 120 out of 180 in the 2021 statistics.
That is why we're saying take these steps, so that next time when these statistics come, you will not say, oh, they are being unfair to us, the situation is different. We're talking of facts and not opinion.
We always appreciate your time on the program. Thank you so much, Mr. Larry Arugundade, Executive Director, International Press Center. Thank you for joining us on the news at 10.
Thank you very much for having me.
Still ahead on the news at 10, Nigeria's stock market is projected to open positive in the month of May after hitting a 14-year high amid strong first-quarter earnings results. That's on Business News. Join us again. I can see Mark Bogun Yusuf already. We're handing over to her, and of course she has more stories from the nation's capital. Hi, Mark.
Hello, Millicent, indeed. And it's some happy news this holiday season as Nigeria's new landing ship tank, NNS Kada, is one port closer home as it makes its port call in Cape Town, South Africa, on her maiden voyage home. All of 100 meters long and 8 floors high, the vessel, which was built in Sharjah in the United Arab Emirates, was handed over to the Nigerian Navy in March. Channels Television was at the harbour in Cape Town when the NNS Kada arrived.
Nigeria's new landing ship tank, the NNS Kada, arrived here in Cape Town, South Africa on the 3rd of May 2022 after similar port calls in Oman as well as Kenya's Mombasa port. There are also scheduled port calls in Angola as well as Gabon's Port Gentil ahead of its arrival in Nigeria. The commanding officer of the NNS Kada, Captain Reginald Adoki, and his vessel were received in Cape Town by Nigeria's High Commissioner to South Africa, Ambassador Mohammed Manta, and an array of top naval officials led by Rear Admiral Monday Unureri, Flag Officer commanding Naval Training Command, who led the delegation from Nigeria.
This is a very huge ship. You can see it's 100 meters long and one of the few landing vessels in this part of the world.
I'm super proud because about 2010 was when the Nigerian Navy decided she was going to recapitalize her fleet. And just last year, I was at Las Palmas to receive NNS Lana, the survey vessel. It means the dream and the vision that was conceived about a decade ago in my lifetime, while still in the Navy, is coming to pass.
We joined the guided tour of the NNS Kada, where we asked Captain Adoki what his vessel is all about and how the journey has been.
This ship is a modification of the traditional landing ship tanks, so meaning that it does more than what landing ship tanks do or did in the Second World War when LSCs were invented. So what it does is primarily is to carry out sea lifts of troops and equipment, but it has other secondary roles by its design. And this is in the area of humanitarian and disaster relief operations.
How has the journey been, including the voyage up to this point?
Wow, it has been very exciting and challenging at the same time, I must say. It has been a 56-day voyage. So far, we have done about half of that.
Were you ever worried about pirates?
Should pirates appear from any direction, we knew exactly what to do. And so, but somehow, luckily for them, throughout the journey, we didn't have any case of pirates. We're also going to the Gulf of Guinea. It is not completely clear of pirates, so we expect, in case it happens, we are also prepared for that.
The NNS Kada leaves South Africa the weekend after a series of reception events in the host country, and after 2 further port calls in Angola and Gabon, is expected in Nigeria on the 27th of this month. From Cape Town, South Africa, Betty Dibia, Channels Television News.
Well, back home, a man has been arrested in River State for reportedly making an attempt to bribe the commander of the Nigerian Navy ship NNS Pathfinder with 700,000 naira to release his boat and some drums of illegally refined diesel. The wooden boat and product were intercepted in course of Navy operations in recent times. The suspect, Kenneth Sunday, is said to have walked into the barracks in Rumo-Lemi area of Obiakpo local government area with the money wrapped in a white plastic bag and demanded to see his boat. He was then asked by a naval officer to identify and inspect the consignment, among many others, that were displayed at the naval jetty. The suspect, however, denied that he was at the Navy barracks to bribe the commander. He also said the boat he inspected was that of his friend. Callous and despicable, that's how the Nigerian Army describes the killing of 2 soldiers by suspected members of the proscribed indigenous people of Biafra, IPOB, and its affiliate, ESN. The soldiers, a retired Master Warrant Officer, Aldo Linus, and Lance Corporal Gloria Matthew, were said to be a couple, and they were attacked and murdered while on their way to Imo State to fulfill their traditional marriage rites. In a statement by the Director, Army Public Relations, Brigadier General Onyema Nwachukwu, it says the action by the group shows their level of hatred and lawlessness, even against their kinsmen, in carrying out their agenda. The Nigerian Army, while condoling with the family of the deceased, assures them that it has commenced investigation to bring the perpetrators to book. Meanwhile, a civil rights organization in Adamawa State is calling on the police to look into the circumstances surrounding the killing of one Adamu Akmado, allegedly by a member of the Hunters Association in Mubi of Adamawa State, a border town between Nigeria and the Republic of Cameroon. The organization is also drawing the attention of security agencies in the state to the indiscriminate use of firearms by vigilante groups and hunters. They believe that disarming them will address the killing of people.
Nigerians are oftentimes caught up in the crossfire by non-state actors in their attempt to address insecurity in the country. These loss of human lives in the hands of non-state actors is a major concern, especially among vulnerable communities in areas bedeviled by insecurity. The recent killing of a 20-year-old man, Adamu Amadu, allegedly by a member of the Hunters Association, is a concern for residents of Mubi South local government area of Adamawa State. Sources say Adamu and his friends were returning home at night on the 26th of April this year when they were intercepted by members of the Hunters Association in Angwan Sebori in Mubi South local government area of Adamawa State. An argument was said to have ensued between the victim and members of the group, resulting in the shooting and killing of Adamu Amadu. Sympathizers are seen commiserating with the family. The father of the deceased, Amadu Mida, while narrating the circumstances surrounding his son's death, blames a wealthy resident of a community for setting up the private security outfit and appeals to the state government to intervene in the matter.
Sai jini ya dauke ni sai na fadi bayan na fadi a wurin sai aka ja ni aka shigar da ni cikin gida to sai mota ya zo atake ya zo ya dauke shi aka kawo shi asibiti.
Speaking to Channels Television, a human rights activist promises to take up the matter.
What we are going to do next is to visit the office of the Commissioner of Police to further give him the little knowledge we have established in Mubi towards what happens, and also to implore him to use his good office to take a quick decision and the necessary action over this matter.
The police says a 36-year-old man suspected to be the killer is already in police custody.
Yaran sun je sun koro su da cutlass da sanduna su suka kira mu kuma sai muka tashi muka je mu biyar mun je aka sai suka taso da ihu wo kariya ne ba mu yi to ni kamun na hankara sauran yan uwana gaba ɗaya sun wase abu ya zo da sosai zan yi kamun in daga bindiga zan yi harbi na ja tun da abun ba garante ke da shi ba kamun in daga sila mistake kawai sai abu ya kubce sai na yi harbi.
Two victims who were found with bullet wounds were rushed to hospital for treatment, and one of them was immediately announced dead by the medical expert.
The death of Adamu Amadu brings to the fore the need for the licensing and training of non-state actors, as well as the need for cooperation between these interventionist groups and security agencies.
That's all from Abuja. It's back to you, Millicent.
Thanks, Markwe. The rescue operations at the site of the collapsed building on Ibadan Street in Ebutemeta, Lagos, that left 10 people dead, has ended. The decision to discontinue the rescue operation was announced by the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, today. The unfortunate incident increases the number of buildings that have collapsed in the nation's commercial hub with grave casualties. Our correspondent, Olumide Macaulay, has more.
With a name made famous by a city, on a street made infamous by a collapsed building, You only have to go a short distance to find the aftermath of the search and rescue operations. These people are helpers to salvage valuables in the rubble, or scavengers out to make a quick buck. Depending on who you speak to at the scene, but who all declined to speak on camera. As onlookers remain, we find the government agencies have all departed, having concluded the search and rescue operations. This scene is becoming an all too familiar sight in Lagos. Some of the unfortunate incidents include, on November 1st, 2021, the collapse of the 21-story building under construction on Gerard Road, Ikoyi. At least 36 people died. On 8th March 2016, the collapse of the 5-story building under construction in Lekki, killing at least 34 people. On the 12th of September 2014, the guest house of the Synagogue Church in Lagos collapsed, killing at least 115 people, including 84 South Africans. According to the Nigerian Institute of Building, 60% of reported cases of building collapse in Nigeria occurred in Lagos. Distress in a building structure can arise from factors including defect, decay, and damage, internal or external. Regulatory authorities require tests for all structures, old and new. This building that collapsed in Ebutemeta was constructed over 28 years ago.
To determine the structural integrity of a building, experts say structural audits should be conducted every 5 years for buildings from 15 to 30 years of age. Now, for buildings from between 30 years of age and upwards, structural audits should be conducted every 3 years. But how often, if at all, are these procedures followed? From the scene of the collapsed building in Ibadan Street, Ebutemeta, Lagos Island, Olumide Macaulay, Channels Television News.
And it's the end of the long holiday to mark the Eid al-Fitr celebration, but some who travel to spend the period with their loved ones appear to be having troubles returning to base. At the domestic wing of the Murtala Mohammed Airport today, passengers whose flights were delayed decried the inconvenience which came without notice. The passengers say they are sick and tired of situations where airline operators do not deem it fit to give sufficient notice before flights are cancelled. Our correspondent, Bukola Samuel Wemimo, has more.
It's the last day of Eid celebrations. Hence, the airport is not as busy as it is during peak periods. At midday, the departure wing bears more volume as passengers make their way down for on-site check-in. The departure board displays flight departing on schedule. But some passengers who spoke with Channels Television News say it is sad that flight delays and cancellations have become the norm.
I've been here since 8 a.m. in the morning, so the flight has been scheduled to 1:45. So we just got checked in now, waiting for the flight, to board the flight. I actually got here without getting any message or any notice from the airline that the service has been rescheduled. So I've been around, just loitering around since morning. And they wasted my time, the energy I put in to come to get here to catch that flight in the morning.
I just get to know in the airport during my checking in. That's where they notify me. I always check my ticket to discover that the time for my departure has been shifted by about 2 hours. I assume there is a penalty for such, so this will not be reoccurring all the time.
And for passengers arriving Lagos, it's a mixed bag.
I travel maybe quarterly, actually, for a meeting like this. So from now, I think so far so good. Today I boarded United Nigeria Air flight. I think the flight is okay. It's very smooth.
The flight was supposed to be for 1 p.m. I spoke with the manager and I asked them to put me in the flight for 11, and that's why I'm here now.
If not, your flight would have been delayed.
Till 5:30. It happens. I wouldn't say it doesn't happen. It happens, but not all the time.
An airline passenger also laments the high cost of tickets.
In the aviation industry, as at now, the ticket fare is so costly. How can I buy a business economy ticket 78,000, 80,000, something of 55 minutes? It's uncalled for.
These passengers are urging regulators to carry out a regular review of the performance of airlines in order to help them improve on their services. Bukola Samuel Wemimo for Channels Television News.
Business News is next. Here's Teniola Shobowale.
Thanks a lot, Millicent. Welcome to Business News. Nigeria's stock market is expected to start off the new month still in positive territory after ending April with a 5.7% gain, and that's the highest monthly gain so far for 2022. This comes as the country's financial markets resume from a two-day break for May Day and Muslim Eid festival. Before the holiday, the market ended the final week of April stronger in the green with a 2.43% gain after sustaining a hangover of positive sentiments in the previous weeks. Meanwhile, the market's benchmark performance indicators cruised into the 49,000 level, while year-to-date return currently stands at 16.2%. Nigeria's pension fund assets increased by 453.8 billion naira in the first quarter of 2022 to 13.88 trillion naira as of the end of March last year, and that's the highest level on record. According to latest report released by the National Pension Commission, the industry's asset under management increased by 3.38% within the period. Further analysis of the report shows that in terms of investments, pension fund administrators' investment in corporate debt securities increased to 1.01 trillion naira as at the end of March this year, up from 943.3 billion naira recorded in December last year. Meanwhile, investment federal government securities declined by 271.56 billion naira in the first 3 months of 2022 to stand at 8.5 trillion naira. Nigeria and Morocco are planning to build the world's longest offshore pipeline and second longest pipeline in the world to carry gas from Nigeria to Morocco. This was made known by the president's media aide, Sulu Ogunlesi, via his official Twitter handle. He explained that the partnership for the 7,000-kilometer-long gas pipeline, originally signed by the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited and ONHYM of Morocco in June 2018, will link the two countries, run across 11 West African countries, and extend to Europe when completed. However, the Minister of State for Petroleum, Mr. Temipre Silva, hints that the proposed gas pipeline may not be completed under the Buhari administration. And that's Business News tonight. It's back to Millicent for the rest of the news at 10.
Thank you, Taniola. More than 100 evacuees, many who have escaped the Mariupol steelworks, have arrived to safety in a Ukrainian-held city. Women and children were rescued from sites in the shattered southern port city over the weekend. However, hundreds of civilians remain trapped in bunkers under the Azovstal steelworks, and Ukraine says Russia has launched a powerful assault on the site. For more on this and other international news, here's Simon Pusey with Around the World in 5.
Good evening and welcome to the Channel Studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. Russian troops have launched new attacks on the Azovstal steelworks in Mariupol after a group of 100 civilians were evacuated. Russian-backed forces were seen firing Grad rockets in the direction of the steelworks. Despite this, the UN and Red Cross hope to oversee more civilian evacuations. Hundreds of non-combatants remain holed up underground at the sprawling factory site alongside Ukrainian fighters. A first group of evacuees from the plant were expected to arrive in a Ukrainian-controlled city on Monday, but the rescue effort ran into delays. Meanwhile, Russia says it has hit a logistics centre near Ukraine's Odessa that it says was used to deliver foreign weaponry. The Defence Ministry said Russia had struck a military airfield near Ukraine's southwestern city of Odessa with missiles destroying drones, missiles and ammunition supplied to Ukraine by the United States and its European allies. The governor of Odessa did say a rocket strike had hit the Black Sea port city on Monday. A Ukrainian nurse who lost her legs in a landmine explosion has shared an emotional first dance with her husband after getting married in a hospital. Victor, the groom, held his wife Oksana in his arms as they danced on the ward in the western city of Lviv. The moment was caught on camera by a volunteer at the hospital. The 23-year-old lost her legs on the 27th of March as she and Victor were returning home when a mine exploded underneath her. He was not injured, but Oksana lost her legs and 4 fingers on her left hand. Indian and Pakistani Muslims have celebrated Eid al-Fitr with prayers and new clothes to mark the end of the holy fasting month of Ramadan. Muslims across India marked the day in and outside mosques. The community, which makes up 14% of India's 1.4 billion population, is reeling from vilification by hardline Hindu nationalists who have long espoused an anti-Muslim stance. Some leaders of India's ruling Hindu Nationalist Party have tactically supported the violence, while Prime Minister Narendra Modi has so far been silent about it. Residents in Islamabad and Lahore also marked the day with prayers and celebrations alongside families and friends. More than 67 million Filipinos have registered to vote in Monday's Philippine elections, which historically have a high turnout. Even though support for the 56-year-old incumbent vice president is high, a recent opinion poll showed Robredo faces an uphill battle with her closest rival, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., maintaining a wide lead ahead.
I've always wanted to do more for my fans.
Boxing legend Manny Pacquiao is also in the running, but faces doubts about his leadership and commitment as a lawmaker. The 43-year-old announced his candidacy in September last year, declaring his readiness to rise to the challenge of leadership and battle poverty and corruption. The Malian government says it is breaking off all defence agreements with its former colonial ruler, France. It cited multiple violations of its sovereignty by French troops in the country and noted a profound deterioration of the military cooperation with France for some time. Mali also cited the June 2021 decision by France to end joint operations with Malian forces and to pull out troops from the country. And finally, a new exhibition on the world-renowned martial arts master Bruce Lee has been drawing in fans and enthusiasts from across the globe. The Chinese Historical Society of America's We Are Bruce Lee exhibit, which opened in San Francisco's Chinatown, looks at many aspects of the martial arts star's decorated life. It particularly explores Lee's popularity across socioeconomic classes in the US, where he was especially popular in minority communities that were underrepresented elsewhere in popular culture. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the Channel Studios in Lagos.
Thank you, Simon, and welcome to Sports News. Liverpool survived a scare against Villarreal to move into the Champions League final and keep their hopes of winning an unprecedented quadruple alive. Boulaye Dia put Villarreal in front after only 3 minutes, converting Etienne Capoe's pass before ex-Arsenal midfielder Francis Coquelin headed in a second from another Capoe cross as the Reds looked rattled. Liverpool had to improve in the second half, and goals from Fabinho, Luis Diaz and Sadio Mane gave the Reds a 3-2 victory in Spain, which means they qualify for the final 5-2 on aggregate. And the Nigerian Women Football League has concluded the draws for the Premiership Super 6 teams in Lagos. March Day 1 fixtures will see Bayelsa Queens take on defending champions Rivers Angels. Amazons FC will face Niger Rotels, while Delta Queens will face Edo Queens. The Super 6 will be played from May the 16th to the 22nd at the Samuel Ogbemudia Stadium in Benin City. The draw ceremony was preceded by the unveiling of a new partner for this season. And Bayern Munich forward Thomas Muller has extended his contract until 2024, which will keep the German international at his boyhood club until the age of 34. Muller, a product of Bayern's youth system, has been with the club since he was 10. He has scored 226 goals and won the Bundesliga title for the 11th time this season. The 32-year-old has been a crucial cog in the Bayern juggernaut that won their 10th consecutive league title this season, topping the charts with 17 assists while also scoring 7 goals. And that's it on Sports News. It's back to Millicent with the wrap of the news at 10.
Thank you, Victor. And news just in is that the President Muhammadu Buhari, today has received former Lagos State Governor Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu in a private visit at his official residence at the State House. Stay with Channels Television for more updates on that story. And the main news again, United Nations Secretary General arrived in Maiduguri today in continuation of his tour of West Africa and meetings with victims of terror. He is to meet with President Buhari in Abuja. That's news at 10 tonight. Thank you for watching. I'm Millicent Walker. Have a good night. Stay safe.